Today is Q&A. Maria is going to be asking me some rapid fire questions. Hopefully this adds some value. I've briefly reviewed the questions, so some of my answers might be a surprise to me, but hopefully at the end of the day, this gives you some actionable tips and tricks and info on how to get better at your flips or overall general real estate or mindset or whatever it might be. All right, go.
Okay, Matt, what is the minimum cash a beginner really needs to not run out of money on their first flip?
Well, that is a really good question. The ultimate answer could be nothing, but in reality, you definitely need to have some money to get going. If you negotiate a good enough deal, you will be able to find a lender that would probably give you 100% of your purchase price and even part of your rehab. But in order to get that, you really need to get a very underpriced, good margin, good spread on your deal. And you're probably going to have, at a minimum, like your resume, your finances in order, so a lender can at least believe that you're credible and credit worthy and you have the ability to execute on the flip. But in reality, you're going to need some money because a lender most likely will not fund 100% of everything, even if you have a really good deal. So how are you going to do that if you don't have your own money? You need to network and find somebody that does have money, that's willing and believes in you, that believes in the deal, that's willing to put up some of their own money for the project. And typically that money is going to be needed for, of course, your rehab and maybe a down payment. And then also, if a lender is going to lend 100% of everything, they're probably the kind of lender that's going to want monthly payments. So you're going to ultimately, you absolutely are going to have some money 95% of the time from someone. But again, that doesn't need to come from you. It could come from a lot of people call it a gap lender, or you could get a second mortgage. And I see it all the time. So if you don't believe it's possible, you got to believe differently. But ultimately, the quick answer is negotiate the best deal possible. Now, on the flip side, if you're frustrated that no one will even give you 100% financing, you probably don't have a good enough deal.
Awesome. Matt, how many flips do you do before you actually made real profit?
One flip. I lucked out. First flip I ever did with my partner and good friend was in Kearns, Utah. It was back in 2004. I certainly didn't know what I was doing. He had a little bit better idea of what he was doing because he had done it before. But the reason, and this is probably going to be similar answers to some of these, the reason we made money is we bought it at the right price and we moved very quick on the remodel. That one I remember very well because I was coming off of working for a home builder and I was pretty used to, even though it wasn't like a W-2, I was pretty used to consistent commissions because this builder was really good at selling houses and I benefited from being in a really popular first-time homeowner neighborhood. So my income was pretty consistent. So I was very concerned and nervous about doing this, but we executed really fast. We were in and out in 3 months. And I think the numbers were, we bought it, this was back in 2004. We bought it, I think, for 87. We sold it for 130. But back then, things did not cost as much as they do now. We only put like 10 or 15 into it. We used a line of credit I had on my house to finance it and to pay for the rehab. And I remember to this day, we netted 20,000 and we each split it. And he made 10, I made 10, and we were off and running.
That's such a cool story. Okay, let's go with, is it normal for a flip to get delayed 2 or 3 months?
Yeah, if you're lazy and you don't have a plan and you don't know what you're doing. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, some of this is self-inflicted. And we've done a lot of videos on this. But if you don't have a plan and take it serious, and even if it's the first one you've ever done, you got to think about it logically and work backwards. How do we want this to look? What is it going to look like when it's done? Then try to back into it. And then that backing into it will kind of give you an idea for how you need to approach it, what order you need to go into. Like, for example, don't start doing the finished paint before you've done the bathrooms or something like that. Sometimes if you go out of order, you're going to delay yourself. If you don't have a good plan and if you haven't thought through it. So planning, whatever that means to you. Also, why it can go slow is if we talk about this all the time. If it's a house that needs a permit and you avoid getting a permit and you get caught by the city, that right there will kill 2 to 3 months. So lack of planning, bad foresight on whether you need a permit or not, and avoiding it and then getting caught, hiring the wrong people, which again, all of this stuff ultimately is your responsibility. If you hired the wrong person and they stole your money and took too long, yes, it's a great learning experience, but don't use them again. And better yet, try to vet those people ahead of time. Where I see it take longer too is if this, say you were thinking, no, I'm going to save money by doing it myself. All of a sudden though, like if you have a real full-time job and a family and you're thinking you can grind this out on the nights and weekends, like you can, but this is a marathon, not a sprint. You're going to run out of gas. And so that's going to delay things. Now, there are times where just bad luck happens. Say I've had it where, we had a flood unexpected or something like that you can't control. Like you got to give yourself a little grace for some of that stuff. But the best way to prevent that, even if you're new to doing it, is really try to plan, do your due diligence, vet the people working on it, be realistic about your time frame. And maybe better yet, if you're inexperienced, don't take on like a really heavy remodel first. Get your feet wet, step by step, start on one that's a little easier, that's less scope of work. And, this is a learning process. You're not going to have it all figured out day one. So start smaller unless you already have really good experience in remodeling houses.
Cool. Matt, what's the smallest profit margin you have set on a basic cosmetic remodel?
So that's a good question
or
too.
Flip.
Yeah, there's a risk and reward. Like if you have a scope of work, like we're looking at one right now, we're going to buy it for $775. It's a $380,000 remodel, and we think it'll sell for 1.5. And we have bracketed a profit margin of 200,000. That's even a little thin for me, not because we're like super greedy. I mean, obviously we want to have as big of a spread and make a lot of money, but it's also risk management. Like on those numbers, you would be crazy to have a profit margin of 20 or 30 or 40 or 50,000, because you could go over budget or the price drop on that price of a home goes down 5-10%. All of a sudden you're wiped out. So the more complicated, the bigger spread, the more extensive of a rehab, you've got to build in way more of a profit buffer. So on this one, not that we'd want to do a house for free, but I feel really confident this house, if we do the scope of work that we're thinking, will not sell for less than 1.3. Yeah, we wouldn't lose money. We wouldn't make a lot. We'd maybe make like 20 or 30. That's not a good compensation for, 380,000 remodel in 6 to 7 to 8, 9 months of your life. Now on the flip side, going back to really answering your question, I'm okay with a smaller profit margin on first-time homeowner neighborhoods where you get it for a good enough price and your scope of work is legitimately very predictable and very quick. So for example, if I'm buying something right now, say for $250, and someone will math check me on this, I'm not going to do the calculations real time, but let's say it will sell for $350 and it only needs $20,000 of work and I can make $20,000, I would do that. Because in those price ranges, your margin for error on your ARV is so much smaller, and your margin for error on going over budget when the scope of work is that much smaller is, again, that much smaller. And it's also the reality that there's not that much margin in some of these, first-time homeowner markets where the competition is more stiff, that it's even a reality to make more than that. So the way that you ensure your profit is by getting in, getting done quick, and getting out fast.
All right, this is a good one. How much are you paying per square foot for labor on your remodels?
Ooh, that one's tricky for me when you just said labor only, because I usually like to think about labor and materials. But over the years, I've done the model of two different versions of Rehab Cruz. One model is like a 1 or 2 man crew, like a handyman, someone that's very competent to do pretty much 60-70% of the house, meaning they'll do the trash out, they'll do the electrical, the plumbing, the demo, the cleanup, the painting, but then we're going to hire out like windows, roof, HVAC, cabinets, countertops, but they'll do the tile, they'll do the bathroom, that kind of thing. And I tracked this forever. It was always pretty, I don't, it was, there was a strong correlation where whatever we spent in labor was about what we spent in direct hard costs from like Home Depot and stuff like that. So I don't know if I can give you a price per square foot on labor only. That one's a harder model to follow. But in general, when I'm hiring a contractor or my total labor and materials, like when I'm doing a pretty much everything flip, like roof, windows, HVAC, finishing a basement, redoing the main floor, I'm anywhere from 70 to $100 a square foot. And then, maybe more of like a cosmetic these days, everything's still pretty darn pricey, 30 to 50. And if it's a medium, 50 to 70. But the best way to know what that is, and I can share it with you guys, break down your scope of work. And I like to break it down. There's certain things that are going to be easy to determine what price it's going to be. Like paint, you can get bids from painters based on the square footage. Your roof, it's based on the square footage of the roof. Cabinets, that's easy to get a bid on the cabinets. The things that are really hard to bid are like the more handyman stuff, like doors, trims, installing that kind of stuff, cleanup, demo. But if you kind of, just like we talked about a minute ago, back into it and go, okay, what are all the puzzle pieces? What all needs to be done to get this house to where we want it? What line items are those? And then it seems overwhelming at start, but if you're doing windows, roof, cabinets, you can get, 3 or 4 people will give you bids on what it's going to cost to do windows, cabinets, the roof, blah, 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 rain gutters. Those things you can get an actual accurate bid on. And then it will be a little bit of a struggle and process to find out what some of those oddball things throughout the project will be. But with a little time and effort and even networking with other people, you can figure it out. But I don't think, and there is also a ratio, like say you're doing a full gut job remodel on 1,000 square foot house, meaning you are doing roof, windows, HVAC, cabinets. Your price per square foot will be more than say the home's 2,000 square feet, because when you have 2,000 square feet, you have more area that's just carpet and paint. And so your price per square foot does go down a little bit. And so like when I've done houses in the 325 to 4,500 square feet, like then it's a little bit more predictable. And then as you do it, you'll kind of notice like, oh, redoing a whole bathroom's X amount. And then you kind of break things down that way. So, but the best way to know that is, and some of this is going to take time, but keep track of all of your numbers and try to break them out so you can identify over time, like, oh, okay, bathrooms are 4. I'm making up numbers right now. Kitchens are generally 15 to 25. And then you can even break it down more of like one box of cabinets costs this much based on what level of rehab we're doing. So that's kind of a long answer, but hopefully those are some ideas.
This is a follow-up question to that one. What about new construction price per square foot?
Oh, this one still stumps me every single day. Definitely depends on your finishes. Like we're here in these Quincy townhomes. I was basically, plus or minus $200 a square, well, a little over $200 a square foot to build these. But these don't have basements. They're slab on grade. We did pretty nice finishes for an east side of Salt Lake townhome project. And I've seen budgets from my borrowers ranging anywhere from like, 170 to 230 a square foot. But then, I have people that I know that are building stuff in Park City that are $300 to $400 a square foot, maybe even $500 a square foot. Bottom line is, I haven't seen a budget. Now, say a national home builder, someone that has just ginormous buying power and access to, labor at competitive prices. They're clearly going to build for less. But if we're talking about your onesie twosie fix and flipper or a one-off spec home or something like that, I don't think it's realistic right now to do anything for too much less than $200 a square foot. Now, when you say that $200 a square foot in Utah, I'm not generally counting the basement for that, because that basement square footage is going to be a little bit less. So you got to look at, make sure you're talking to apples. A lot of times you'll just base it off of the above grade square footage, because if you were to say you build a 4,000 square foot home and 1,500 square feet of it is unfinished basement square footage, that price per square foot to build the entire square footage might seem less on paper than if you're just saying, oh, it's 2,500 square feet above grade, because that basement to versus slab on grade, it might be an extra 20 or 30 or 40,000 bucks. So, there is some nuance to that, but bottom line, best practice, find a contractor that's actually built one, have them share their numbers, but you got to really pay attention to what finishes are in the home, because you could not do base and case, or you could do like way cheaper doors, you could get way cheaper cabinets, do vinyl siding on the outside, not as nice of windows, and that will dramatically reduce the price of the home and the cost of the home. But what is your intent? Are you, I've seen it too, where people try to save money and they're in a market where they should have done nicer, and it just totally kills them. And on the flip side, you could do the same. You can overbuild for what the market needs or wants.
I think I know the answer to this one. Would you buy a flip without an inspection if the price is right?
I've done that many times. Sometimes it's worked out great. Sometimes it hasn't worked out great. In fact, we have one right now that we thought, a little cavalier about it. It's like, this seems like a good price, and actually we lucked out. There was nothing super wrong with this one, but I've definitely bought it where if I would have done a basic sewer inspection or meth inspection, I would have saved 15,000 bucks and probably not done the deal. So if you have time, definitely do some minimum level of inspection, like a meth inspection, a sewer inspection. If it's a way older house, a foundation inspection. I've had issues with that. But yes, there are times like if you're getting a good enough price on the house where even the land value is probably worth it, like, yeah, I'd do that then. Or if you just know, like, heck, even if we spent 150 bucks a square foot, knowing that you know what the ARV is, yeah, I would do that. But bottom line, without a lot of experience, definitely do some inspections.
Matt, what's the biggest financial mistake new flippers make?
That's a great question. Borrowing the money from the wrong people, partnering with money from the wrong people. So sometimes that mistake can come from where you get the money. Financially speaking, maybe buying a property that doesn't have the right spread, even though someone was willing to give you the money. This really isn't financial, but it kind of goes back to one of the other questions, is that the biggest mistake I see people make is taking way too long, not maybe adjusting the price quick enough, thinking that they deserve something when the market's telling them differently. I have plenty of borrowers right now that are holding out for a price because they don't want to lose money. But if you're not getting offers on the house, you're going to lose the money anyway. So you might as well drop the price and just rip that Band-Aid off. And so sometimes the financial mistakes are more self-induced because of like psychology or expectations. I'm not saying give anything away. But, and then just taking too long, or, getting the wrong kind of loan, or, paying more than you should, or partnering with somebody that it's not really an equal relationship based on who's doing what.
Do you recommend using credit cards to cover part of the rehab budget?
Ultimately, no, right? But I've done it. I know a lot of people that have done it. Sometimes you got to scrape things together. Now, never put yourself in a spot where if the timing of getting paid back, like if you have no money and you're maxing out your credit cards, and your justification for doing that is you're very confident that the house will sell before your credit card's due and you'll get paid back, like that's really risky. Everyone's got a different risk profile. Now, certainly people have probably done that and come out ahead. Maybe the market just moved in the right direction for them at the right time, or they executed perfectly on it. But I've definitely heard sad sob stories from borrowers where it didn't, and they have a huge credit card bill that was not covered by a successful flip. And then, yeah, that's a sad deal. But best practices, no, don't put on your credit card. But I mean, let's be honest, I've seen it work, and I've also seen it not work.
Okay. Is it true hard money lenders won't fund you if you have zero experience?
No, that is not true. If you have a really good deal and you're really great at negotiating a price of a home and there's very good upside, then yeah, I can see where I've done it. Well, I've done it before where we lend 100% because what the hard money lender is looking at going, okay, if this person totally screws it up and doesn't perform or doesn't do a very good job, would I be okay taking the house back? And could I sell it even if they make the condition worse? And so if that answer for a lender is yes, then of course, right? Because at least I anyway, I want to see people win. I want to see people do well. And if someone's really good and ambitious and finds a really good deal, I mean, I obviously don't ever want to lose money as a lender, but I would, and I've done it. I've given them money at 100% if they get a really good deal. So, but it's everyone's looking at it differently. The borrower's looking at it for the upside, the excitement. It's a new deal. The lender should be looking at it is, okay, let's look at it. What is the likelihood if this goes bad? And we have to foreclose. Are we going to be able to get out of it okay if it's in the same condition or even if they make it worse?
How many contractors do you interview before picking one for a flip?
That's a good question too. I've lucked out over the years because I've really been connected to really awesome people like I am now. So start with getting good referrals from credible people. Network with, in the local real estate clubs. Try to do as much due diligence, get referrals from their people. Definitely if it's kind of a cold introduction and you haven't heard from anyone, maybe you found them on classifieds. I mean, definitely insist on seeing some of their prior work and talking to some of their prior customers. Where I see people get lazy. They want to think that the first person they talk to, because maybe that person's really good salesman, has it figured out. And then 9 times out of 10, what happens is it just becomes hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. Fights with the contractor. They've stolen money, whatever it is. So do as much due diligence as you can. Don't just take the first person that comes in front of you without vetting them, with more detail.
Matt, what neighborhoods in Salt Lake or Utah still have real margins and which ones are completely dead?
Well, I mean, ultimately the answer is any of them can work depending on if you can find the right deal. But in general for flipping, like I never see the neighborhoods where it's a newer built area. Like so in Harriman, South Jordan, where most of the homes started being built like say 20 years ago, most times those haven't had time to get hammered and worn out by the homeowners that have lived there, and so they usually don't have a spread that's flippable unless you're getting it based on financial distress of the homeowner. That would be the exception, where maybe say someone's losing it to foreclosure or short sale, or you have an inside track, they're getting divorced or someone died. I've been able to do it where you pick up a house and maybe don't even do too much to it because you just got the price right to buy. But where you're always going to see homes that are flippable are in neighborhoods where they're 100 years old or 60 years old, where but they're in a good part of town, like in Salt Lake, of course, or probably any major city. The closer to the heartbeat of the city, where values have always been higher, those are great houses because they don't always need to be like a total junker drug house. They can just be grandma's house where someone's lived there for 60 years. They've maintained it really well, but you can push a way higher value by putting modern finishes and updating it. So that's where you're going to find value. But the bottom line is don't think that just one part of town you can find value. You can find value anywhere, but you're either going to have to negotiate it or do it by value add.
Matt, have you ever lost money on a flip and still posted online like it was a win?
Well, I don't know if I like the posting online thing, but like, yes, I've lost money and considered it a win because there was a lesson learned. And that could be for a variety of reasons. Like I've had many houses where I felt like at the time we bought it right. We executed our timeline, we hit our budget, but maybe while we owned it, the market softened and turned a little bit, and it was really nothing we could foresee, or at least wasn't likely, and maybe we lost money. I still consider that a win because there was nothing we could have really done differently other than had a crystal ball to know what the market would have done. Where it's frustrating, and it's not necessarily a win, but you still learn a lesson, is when it's self-induced. Like I remember a time, it was probably like 2013, 14, 15, when we were flipping like 60 homes a year. And it was self-induced losing money because we had way too many houses and too many of them were sitting for too long. We took forever to remodel them just because we didn't have the capacity as far as our systems and processes and rehab crews to get them all done in the time frame that we would have liked to, so that we could have made money. So some of these we sat on for a year and a half, burning hard money, and that's why we lost money. Or we took shortcuts because we want to try to get them done quicker because we had so much inventory, and then we lost money. So those ones, I mean, they were wins in that we learned something, but I mean, they weren't fun wins.
Would you post it though?
I mean, I guess that's up to you. I'd post it if you're trying to show other people, what not to do. I wouldn't post it for the reasons of like, oh, poor me kind of thing. So maybe it's what are your intentions for posting it?
Okay, Matt, after analyzing thousands of deals in Utah, how do you train yourself to identify a profitable flip in under 1 minute?
I don't know if you can do it under 1 minute, but you could do it under 1 minute this way. And this is where if you've done a lot of flips and you're really good at running comps, and if you can really run comps fast and you know what the threshold is for like the highest retail price you can get in that neighborhood, then you can apply simple, everyone knows like the 70% rule or the 80% rule. Is you can kind of say, if you know the ARV and if you're fast, you could probably run comps in a minute. And then go, okay, well, what would be 70% of that number? That, is likely that could be a flippable property. And certainly if you've done enough and you go, okay, from the pictures, this one's hammered. This one's going to be one of those $100 a square foot. And you know what the ARV is, you take 80% of ARV minus rehab, that probably, even if you're using hard money, is going to be a good enough spread. So those would be some quick ways to at least know if you should look at it quicker. Certainly though, do your full analysis before saying yes to it.
All right, Matt, do you always stage your flips or only higher price properties?
These days, it seems like we're staging all of them. And there's good reasons to stage, especially for smaller homes. I think of a lot of smaller homes where it might be hard for somebody to envision where to put things because the space feels kind of small. But oddly enough, with furniture in there, it does actually make the house that's small look bigger. And so I really like staging small homes or even homes that maybe you didn't go lights out on the remodel, and really nice furniture will actually make the house look better. And then on bigger homes, sometimes you don't need them or more, but also it's that curb appeal, or not curb appeal, but it's that wow factor. You want someone to fall in love with the house, even if they're falling in love with maybe the furniture that's not coming with it. But it's just that perception. You want them to fall in love with everything. So staging helps from that marketing perspective, that fall in love with it, but it also helps people that can't envision how furniture would go in the home, especially on smaller homes. Now, the reason a lot of people don't is staging can be expensive. If you're holding on to a flip for 4 or 5 months, that could be $3, $4, $5, $6,000 in furniture, which some people don't see the value in. So we kind of default to doing it because maybe it just makes us feel better. And I mean, it's hard to know. I wish you could run a parallel universe and say, this one we're not staging, this one we are, and they're identical houses in the same spot, and to see how it turns out. Now, I guess the other comment, let's say the market like during COVID was just on fire. No one needed to stage houses because supply was so low. and there were so many buyers that it was like everything was gobbled up. So that's another good answer, is like for like right now where things are a little slower to sell, the more your property can stand out with finishes and staging, it's the way to go, even though you're spending money to do it.
Okay, let's do one last question. When you were starting, how did you avoid running out of money in the middle of a flip? Or did you ever have that happen?
Yeah, we probably did, but luckily we had access to funds that we could cover it. And this happens all the time. And so we kind of talked about this earlier. The best way to prevent that is to do your research and homework up front. But every once in a while, something will happen where it's like you couldn't foresee that when you open up that wall, there was just some huge disaster that cost more money. So maybe plan on ahead of time that there is a chance, like let's say you've got 100 grand for this flip, your budget is 100 grand. Maybe what you should do ahead of time is go, oh, okay, I need to have a backup plan if this goes over. Is my lender going to be willing to lend me a little bit more money if I show that the value's there? Is the people that I partnered with, worst case scenario, are they going to have a little bit more money? Or will I have access to a little bit? Because the worst thing you can do, because it will totally undercut your value, is to not finish the flip and then have it sit there and try to talk someone into buying it without appliances in. Or no, you give us a full price offer, we'll put the cabinets in. Like those are Hail Marys. And in a hot market, someone will probably do that. But I'd say be prepared ahead of time, think through that. And even if you're running quote unquote conservative numbers, especially if you're flipping more as a business and over time and doing more than one at a time, you've got to take it serious enough where you've got to have reserves, not only for your flipping business, but also for your home life. So don't put all your eggs in a flip if that means you're not going to be able to pay your mortgage, for the next month. So a lot of it's just planning and then planning for the what ifs.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Maybe we should do a part 2.
Let's do it. Thanks.